Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. I should have said welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do yet more alternate ideas using the March 25 paper pumpkin kit, the Daisy Daydreams. I've made quite a few of them. I'll link all of those in the description box below. There are 5 cards, which I promised 6, so I did an extra one. And then I made 3 using the envelopes. And then it occurred to me that I'm blithely say, oh, and you do this and you cut this envelope in half. Well, if you never use the other pieces, cutting an envelope in half doesn't create like double or triple the work. It just sort of creates big pieces of scraps. And what I wanted to do was show you what I do with the other pieces. So this is the gorgeous box, so I'll put that off to one side. And also, just to horrify you, I mean, seriously, prepare. This is my own personal scribbling, but I don't know whether this would help you. What I tend to do is I just make copies, just take a picture and print it out. You know, this is the yellow card and this is the blue card. And then what I do is I make a note of which card I made using which one. You know, look at that, that's a bit horrendous, but then I can see what ingredients I've used and what ingredients I logically have left. So let me explain more about what I mean by that. So here was the envelope that I made this card with and said, oh, here's a lovely card you can make with an envelope. And what I was left with was this piece. You know, that was the other part of it. So in order to be true to my word, what I need to do is make something else with this piece of the envelope. So I'll put the original card and the envelope off to one side because we don't really need those. And I will get about showing you another card that I can make. So I'm making 2 cards out of one envelope, which then truly doubles what there is. So the base, like its counterpart, is Mossy Meadow, and it's 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, and then a nice crease with the bone folder. There is the inside piece, because you'll need a lighter piece to write on, which is 5 1/4 by 4, but I don't spend the time showing you how to stick a piece of basic white inside an envelope, inside a card. So let's get on and get the pieces done. And then what we need to do is cut this down. So what I'm going to do, bring in the paper trimmer, I'm going to cut this. I wasn't sure whether I needed more at the top or more at the bottom, but bear in mind there's also these pieces sort of get narrowed in. So I'm going to cut this, even though we need a piece that's 4 by 5 1/4, I'm going to cut it at 5.5. And then I've got this, which is like these pieces that I can use again to make layers for stamping the greetings on the front. So even though this looks a little bit like a scrap, this is a usable piece down the line. And then what we need to do is cut this down to at least 5 1/4. So we can slice off this little edge here. Can you see just where the envelope is on the back? So we can just slightly get rid of that. And one of the good things, I know I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, was to make sure that your blade is really sharp. When you're cutting edges and you're cutting thin paper like envelopes, it's really a good idea to have a nice sharp edge. So that's as straight as it can be. And now we can go over to the other side and cut to 5 1/4. So I'm just lining it up with a paper trimmer, and it's almost a shame that I'm cutting off the piece, but you know what, let's make it slightly bigger then. Let's make it 5 3/8, because then we're going to get as much of this lovely honeycomb pattern as we can. And what we've done though is we've got rid of that diagonal edge. There is still a little piece of the envelopes behind, but I don't think it's really going to matter in this instance. So let me just have a look. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some stamping and put this on and then put the piece on. So I think it might be nicer if we had more at the top and we cut the excess off the bottom. So I'm going to put it at 4 1/8 because we're now doing a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 card. So I'll just go ahead and slice that piece off the bottom. As always, of course, do not fear, all the directions and dimensions will be on my blog, so they will be listed out for each card, so you don't have to, you know, panic and try and remember what each one was. So because it's been an envelope, what I did was I put it onto a silicone mat or a squishy surface, and I rubbed it with my bone folder as best I could to try and get rid of as much of the crease as possible. It's not going to come all the way out because it's actually been folded. If you have a score line that hasn't been folded, it's very easy to push it out. But the fibers on this one have already been broken so that it can bend, but we've got a way to disguise that. So now what I need to do is attach this to the front of the card. And I know I said in one of my previous videos, it depends where it falls in the paper trimmer. Sometimes you get literally a little hair's breadth of a difference. So always put the shorter side to the back. And I am just going to bring in my rolling adhesive. Now we could peel these pieces off. I did do that on one of my envelope pieces, and unfortunately for the one that I did, it's sort of semi-frayed it, so I'm not going to do that. I will just put some adhesive on the back of that fold. Okay, now just going to have that 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then just to fill this in, this is one of the punch outs that came in the kit. I'm going to pop it here. But so this doesn't look so empty, I'm going to bring in the honeycomb stamp, and I'm going to bring in the crushed curry and stamp it. And the advice, the usual advice with stamping is do the stamping first, because if you need to change the paper or flip it over, you've always got that opportunity. However, we don't have that when it's a pre-printed envelope, so we're just going to have to do it our best. And let's hope that I haven't tempted fate. So we'll pop one there, one like that, and one that way on the other side, just so it gives it a little bit of something rather than being big and open and plain. And then we can pop these on. And I think I might even attach those with dimensionals, because why not? So let's put one on there, one on there, and one of the cards I was making the other day just needed half a piece. This one is quite skinny, so I will just put this on with the dimensionals. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of semi-disguise that fold line. Where the colors are isn't so bad, but where it's plain, it really shows up. So there we have it. You know what I'm going to do? I am going to bring in a scrap of paper. Let me just find one. Oh, you know what I'll use? I'll use the piece of the inside, because I feel here could just use a little bit more honeycombing. So if you have already attached something and you suddenly feel it needs a little bit more, as long as you put something to mask the edge, then you can get away with it. I'm going to tell a big fib now and say I did that on purpose just so I could show you that technique. But of course, as you know, that's not true. And don't forget, this is the piece that goes inside. So of course, all you need to do is make sure that the piece you stamped onto, if you don't happen to have a piece of scrap paper lying around, which would be more advisable, Alyson, but in a pinch, I used that, and then the plain white piece can go on the inside. And then this piece I cut out of some scraps of envelope, which actually I've got. This is one that I used from the next card, and there was just a piece that was honeycombed out. There was a bee got cut out, and this was what was left from that piece. So I'm literally using as many scraps as I possibly can. So this one measures 2 3/4 by 1 1/2, and this is 2 7/8 by 1 3/8. And then again, I'm using one of the cute little punch out daisies. However, when I looked at a greeting that I wanted to put on this card, there wasn't one. So what I'm actually going to do is use To a Wonderful Friend, which is a greeting that came out of the February 25 Paper Pumpkin kit. The best bit about Paper Pumpkin is you get the kit, you get all the ingredients to make the cards, but you get a spot and you get a stamp set that you keep and can use forever. So why not use it if it's a design or a greeting or something? So this was the stamp set that came in last month's kit, and I'm going to use it because that's why we have them after all. So I'm going to use the Mossy Meadow ink, and this says To a Wonderful Friend, because I think it's just going to be more usable personally for the greetings that we have from this month. So I've stamped that slightly to the right, as you can see. Pop that onto its layer. That can now go on the front of the card, and it can tuck under the daisies because they are raised up. And it can just go there. And then this little daisy can go onto a dimensional. And I am just going to bring in one of the packs of the many mini dimensionals. One of the best things that Stampin' Up! Do is when they do the Paper Pumpkin is the kits come with the most generous amount of dimensionals. You can buy them in the catalogue if you need to, and actually I've got a few black ones as well when I'm doing darker projects. But to be honest, hand on heart, I haven't bought any for a long time because the amount that they give us is just so generous. So that is the other piece of the card, which is, that was the first part. That's made using the other part when it's been cut open, of course. So now I've literally got 2 cards out of 1 envelope, and the scraps are sort of, you know, they're minimal like this, and there is still a piece left that I could cut another layer from. So to have added 2 pieces of cardstock and it used a few of the punch outs in an alternate fashion, I think that's really quite an awesome way to make the most of the envelopes in the kit. So that's card number 1. Let me get on and show you a second one. So this was the card. Again, here's the other piece of one that I cut out. I think this was in the original 5. And I've got some dimensions written here. So this is the envelope that I used. So I cut this piece out, and then of course I was left with this. There's the flap from the top, and then there is the back. And then what I thought was, then I need to join these together somehow and make another card. So I took a piece of basic beige, and again it's 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, fits into a standard envelope, as you know, because I say it often enough. Give it a nice sharp crease. And then a different card I made actually had just the envelope at the bottom. And then when I had this, I thought, ooh, I could put the scallopy part of the back together with the rounded part of the bottom, just to give it a different look. So what I did was I went ahead and measured it, and there just needs to be, of course, a little overlap that I can stick them together with. And this piece that I cut off is 1 3/4. So this is a 1 3/4 piece. My lovely little post-its to make out like I hadn't already done that. So then what we need to do is join these together. And the best way to do that is to lay that down and then lay this one down, because we can put sticky all the way along the back. So I am going to bring in my silicone mat, roll some adhesive all the way along that edge, and then it doesn't, well, it shouldn't, well, it won't matter actually, because we're going to cover that anyway. And then we can put it on the card front. And I know it's still too wide, but we're going to be cutting that down, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to put it quite close to the top. And then this piece is going to go quite close to the bottom. And we will stick it together like that. Like I say, this doesn't matter because it's going to be covered. And now we've got the piece that we can cut to make sure that it is just the 4 1/8. Because we went really close to the edges, we're going to cut this at 4 1/8. So again, I just need to bring in the paper trimmer, and we'll, oh, you know, how silly am I? What I need to do is cut that round. Forgot that part. That would have looked a bit funky weird, wouldn't it? So please do remember to cut the pieces off the top of your card. So now we can line this one up, and you'll have to be very careful because it doesn't have a straight edge to hold it onto. Again, having a sharp edge. Okay, now, oops, let me pop this. So this is going to be a little bit narrower than the card, but you will see what we will do. So what you need to do now is cover this piece with something, because the greeting isn't going to be big enough to cover everything. So what I'm going to use is the basic beige ribbon, and I'm just going to cut a length that is long enough. Now, if you don't happen to have basic beige ribbon, I'm going to show you a little trick. If you take a piece of cardstock, sort of cut to the appropriate width, and give it a really good scrunch. And then, because it's such quality cardstock that Stampin' Up! Give us, and it's coloured all the way through, you can, not going to do it for me quickly now, is it? No. You should be able to pull it apart. Oh my gosh, come on. I do this often. There we go. So if you pull it apart, because it's such thick quality, and you do it really carefully, you can pull it apart, and because you've scrunched it and the insides are fluffy, you've made like a suede, and then you could wrap the suede around from the front to the back and you get the same look. But we are going to be using our lovely, just did that on my work surface, didn't I? What am I always saying? Make sure you do it on your silicone mat so it doesn't get on your work surface. It's a good job I know myself, because I'm bullying myself quite badly today. Good job I know I'm just teasing. So there we go. We can stick that over, and now we can pop this onto the front. So we'll stick that and that, and then just make sure those two pieces are stuck down nicely. Now you can go ahead and pop a piece on the inside of this one, but you don't necessarily need to do that because it's light enough to write inside. Sometimes I know people like to do it because they feel it finishes it off, so the choice is yours. So now here we go. We've got a piece of beige, which is 1 7/8 by 3.5. We've got the piece that we cut off the bottom, which we know is 1 3/4. So I'm just going to see if that would pull. No, it won't. So we're going to trim that to a nice neat edge, and then it's 3 3/8 long. And then we've got a piece of one of the other pieces of the envelope. And now they all layer on. So this is 1 5/8 by 3/4. So now we can go ahead. Oh, this daisy I need for the project. So this is a spare piece we could use for something, I'm quite sure. But I'll pop those off to one side for now, and then we can build the layers of this one. So we'll put the lovely piece of spare blue envelope onto the other piece of basic beige. Let's go ahead and stamp this first. We don't want to push our look too far. So I will bring in a mossy meadow again and find to a wonderful friend, which came from the February 25 from last month's kit as I'm doing this. And we can stamp that on. Close the ink pad, of course. So as I'm throwing things off to one side out of the shot, I'm not throwing them into an open ink pad. So we'll pop that on there. This can go with dimensionals or it can just go on. So I think I'm just going to stick mine on, but I will put the daisy on with the dimensional. I can see that's a little bit off, but rather than you watch me struggle to do it, I will do that when I have finished. So now we just need to pop a dimensional into the middle of this lovely daisy. Oops. Oh, and pop that into place. So now we've got a card that we've made using the other half of the envelope. So I don't know where I put the original. I don't know where I put the original blue one. Here it is. So this was the envelope, the front, and then the closing flap in the back. So we've got that card. And now we've got that card. So we've got two cards we've made using one envelope. And again, all we've done was added two pieces of main body cardstock. So that's the second one done. The third one, this was the card that we made. And it was, I sliced that open. And this was what we had left. To be honest, I didn't think up anything I could do with that one yet, but you know, never say never. I don't think I'll probably do a video. I might just pop that on my blog, so check back for that one. But what I am going to do is show you one third card which uses the piece that was left after we'd made these two, and these were definitely from the original 5. So this was the card. I just cut the card front off and then added lots of, I don't know if you can see it glistening, lots of Wink of Stella and one of the extra daisies and little doodads to brighten it up. And then this piece was a quarter of the card. It was half of the back piece. This was a piece of the envelope. So they were 2 cards that I'd made using this card base. It wasn't an envelope, but I had the 1/4 left. So what I did was I took it and I cut it into pieces. So body of the card, basic black, 8.5 by 5.5. Go on, take a guess where it's scored. That's right, 4 1/4. And we'll give it a nice crease with the bone folder and the piece of basic white to go inside, 5 1/4 by 4, but we don't spend time showing how to stick a piece of plain white in. And then what we have is some crushed curry, and the crushed curry is 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then we have a piece of basic white, which is 4 by 5 1/4. So what we're going to do is we are going to stamp honeycombs onto this. And let me just bring in a piece of paper. I did this the other day. Talk amongst yourselves. I forgot my scratch paper to put under, because otherwise then my grid papers get all like messy and dirty. So what we're going to do is we are just going to stamp these sort of everywhere. Doesn't have to be any particular pattern, as long as it's visible and just gives the plain white background a little bit of something. There we go. So that is the plain white background covered. So pop my scratch paper off to one side. So now that is stamped and technically can go on the front of there. So what we had was that piece of that 1/4 sheet of the back of the card. It was 2 3/4 by 4 1/4, but that was slightly too big. So I cut each piece down to be 1 1/4 by 2. So I've now got 4 pieces that are 1 1/4 by 2, but I cut some basic black and they are 2 1/8 by 1 3/8. And then we're just going to layer these onto each other. I will put this little template on my blog when I list all the sizes and dimensions for this card, so you'll be able to see. I mean, it just meant there was a 1/4 inch scrap left from a piece that was left over. But let me get these layered on. Black just gives them a nice dark effect. So that's that. Now this bee, there are bees that come in the punch outs, but what I did was I took the bee out of the stamps, just took a little piece of basic white and stamped him on there, because that's all it takes. And then I took the darkest Daffodil Delight stamping blends and coloured him in. Normally I would wait a little while for this to be a little more dry. Actually, this was a little bright, isn't it? I'm going to just make him a darker yellow, just because we've got the crushed curry rather than Daffodil Delight. And then I just took and fussy cut him out. I do enjoy fussy cutting, so for me that was a pleasure. But there are 9 of these bees in the kit, so if you don't want to go to the trouble of doing that. And then all we need to do is stamp the greeting. And what I have, which, because it's honey is sweet, one of the stamps says sweetest birthday wishes, and that is a stamp I did want to use. So let's just ink it up with a Memento black. Ooh, I don't normally get as much as of that. Let me just put that in. Ooh, into the cleaning station on my lovely chamois. And now we can go ahead and build the card. So we'll put the basic white onto the crushed curry, whoops, with just the 1/8 inch around. We'll put this whole layered set onto the front of the basic black. And then we can add the white greeting onto that bit of crushed curry on its layer. So now what we need to do is put adhesive on the back of these, and we're going to make sort of a little grid shape. I saw this grid, and I think it was Laurie Perez, who was the lady whose card I had seen had done it. And I do believe it was when I was looking up the February 25 set, and that was the one that she had used. So we will put, well, we'll put one here. I just thought it was such an interesting shape. One there. Might need to move that one down a little bit. And then that in the middle. And it was sort of a, it wasn't a full grid, it was just a slightly offset. And I thought that was really quite lovely. So I am going to stick the bee on, but I'm going to stick him on so we don't have competing dimensionals. He can just go on where that is. I'm actually going to just stick a little honeycomb on there to fill that gap. It's a lovely gap filler, that stamp. And then I will pop some dimensionals, one on each corner. And pop that in the middle. So it's nice because the sweetest goes with the concept. The honeycomb picks out the honeycomb. So there you have it. So this was the card base with the two pieces which left that, which we made that card from. We've got the envelope with this card that we finished off that card from. And then we've got this envelope. Oh, my arms aren't long enough. That we made this card from, that we finished that one off with. So I think that's a great way just to show how you can literally use up all of the pieces that you've got left over. It's not here's a scrap and go off and think of something to do with that. You've now got two ideas. You can take one envelope and use both of the ideas. Like I say, I will link all the videos in the bottom of this one. The directions and dimensions will always be on my blog as usual. If you've got a question or a comment, pop those in the box below. I think I'm going to try and stop myself from doing more. I'm getting a little bit obsessed with this kit. If you like what you've seen, please consider subscribing. If you've liked what you've seen, please give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate those. And last but not least, thanks so much for watching.